What and why of microeconomics?
Microeconomics works in such a way that is rooted in our own personal decisions in our daily tasks and in our lives. Microeconomics can be related or explained in the simplest of things. Whether or not a person chooses to buy something that he desires, decide on what to wear on a certain day, or choose which restaurant to eat at, microeconomics will always be present. Microeconomics is rooted in how a person decides. It is how a person decides to properly make use of what he has and properly learn how to allocate. Allocate not only his resources but also his time, value, ideas, and many more factors related to deciding on how to go about his life. Economically speaking, microeconomics is also an interrelation of studying how consumers purchase the goods that they need and desire, with how producers give it to them and handle the demand for these services and goods. According to the reading, microeconomics usually works out in a smooth way, although has some flaws from time to time. Lastly, microeconomics also tackles the factors in which why economic decisions fail. An example would be why businesses would be in debt or why businessmen would fail at their transactions or business negotiations. What microeconomics teaches economists and non-economists, though, is that these wrong decisions may be compensated for and they may be built again through a strong foundation of understanding the basic principles of microeconomics, proper allocation of resources, and better decision making.
What is information?
Today, consumers and producers not only interact in markets or shopping malls or even traditional bazaars, but most of the interaction is happening in the internet. In the business world, customers pay a price for a product or service they acquire. However, pricing for a product or service can be very tricky. Price serves a twofold purpose. Example, a face mask costs an estimate of 80 pesos per box on a regular day. However, its price started to increase rapidly when an incident occurred. Another example would be oil or gas. Throughout the years, the demand for oil has been rising as population increases. The demand is getting higher than before. Thus, this creates a higher price for oil since it is not readily available and it cannot be made in a short period of time. It shows that when something is scarce, its prices increases. Therefore, the high price gives information that the product has a scarcity and a reason on why it is priced highly.
What is incentives?
Incentives are most understood by many as a motivation or encouragement to do something. It is something that motivates a producer or consumer to follow a course of action or to change behavior. Higher prices provide an incentive to existing producers to supply more because they provide the possibility of more revenue and increased profits. The incentive function of a price rise is associated with an extension of supply along the existing supply curve. In most societies, incentives have a reward. Like for example, in De La Salle University, there are incentive classes. Most students attend incentive classes even though it is not required because there is a reward for it. Meaning to say, the students' grades are their motivation to do the incentive. Incentive is how people behave to the price of a product. Let us say that most people are satisfied with the gas of their car priced at 45 pesos per liter. If the companies give a price rise of gas from 45 pesos to 60 pesos per liter, chances are the customers who are willing to pay 45 pesos per liter will no longer want the product because it is too expensive. Thus, the price of oil gives the users of oil an incentive to buy other brands of oil which is cheaper, or to find other alternatives such as electric cars, walking, or biking. This is evident as electric cars are given acknowledgement because it is eco-friendly and uses electricity instead of gas. This is used by some countries to encourage people to lessen cars powered by gas to avoid pollution. In Singapore, The prices of cars are way above the average retail price because they encourage Singaporeans to find an incentive to walk, bike, or use the public transportation. Another example would be if a milk company wants to generate more profit, thus creating higher price than the average cost of milk, the consumers will opt to find an alternative by switching brands, which is a loss for the company.
What is price mechanism and how does it work?
Price mechanism is an economic term that refers to the way the prices of commodities affect the supply and demand of goods and services. Price mechanism affects both buyers and sellers who negotiate prices of goods or services. Moreover, a price mechanism refers to a wide variety of ways to match up buyers and sellers through price rationing. Now, let's move on to how it works by understanding these two examples. First, price mechanism can be seen through bidding in the LSU bids to pick. The seller will post an item for bidding and indicate a starting or asking price, which refers to the price that he or she is willing to accept. With this, students who are interested in the product or commodity will comment their bidding price or the price they are willing to pay. Another good example of price mechanism, but in the long run, would be the change in prices of fuel. If fuel prices increase, demand wouldn't necessarily go down immediately. Although, companies will propose new alternatives to fuel, like biodiesel fuels or cars powered by electricity. In conclusion, price mechanism is a system by which the allocation of resources and distribution of goods and services are made based on relative market price.
Price mechanism and how does it fit?
The interaction of buyers and sellers in free markets enables goods, services, and resources to be allocated prices. Relative prices and changes in price reflect the forces of supply and demand and help solve the economic problem. Resources move towards where they are in the shortest supply, relative to demand, and away from where they are least demanded. Price changes send contrasting messages to consumers and producers about whether to enter or leave a market. Rising prices give a signal to consumers to reduce demand or withdraw from a market completely. And they give a signal to potential producers to enter a market. Conversely, falling prices give a positive message to consumers to enter a market while sending a negative signal to producers to leave the market. For example, a rise in the market price of smartphones sends a signal to potential manufacturers to enter this market and perhaps leave another one. Similarly, the provision of free healthcare may signal to consumers that they can pay a visit to their doctor for any minor ailment, while potentially private healthcare providers will be deterred from entering the market. In terms of the labor market, a rise in the wage rate, which is the price of labor, provides a signal to the unemployed to join the labor market. The signaling function is associated with shifts in demand and supply curves. In conclusion, the price mechanism is said to work effectively through a combination of rationing, incentives, and signals.
To bring this to a conclusion,
Microeconomics understands and studies the decision-making ability of numerous consumers in terms of the goods and services they would want to buy, as well as how producers respond in order to meet with the demands of their consumers, and of course the interaction between the two as a whole. Regarding that, majority of the time the transaction between consumers and producers work just fine with maybe minimal inconveniences that are too small to notice. Which is most likely why, as mentioned in the article, non-economists pay no heed or are entirely unaware of microeconomics as they rarely show up in center stage in terms of degree of problems. But of course, nothing is 100% foolproof, which is why, just like many other things, problems arise. Occasionally, there are large-scale problems that occur where it affects a large number of consumers and producers. Which brings out the main point of the argument that microeconomics should be learned and understood, that it should be taken up and observed by even non-economist people in regards to the understanding of the status of transactions, the reason for success or failure of a transaction, as well as what actions can be done if they do end up failing or when they have the possibility of failure. There is an interaction between consumers and producers in the market which currently has evolved into various definitions. The market is no longer just the traditional marketplaces or bazaars anymore, but these include boutiques, restaurants, shops, and many other establishments, as well as overly increasing marketplaces throughout the internet. The relationship between consumers and producers in a market of course centers on the payment that consumers can give in order to obtain goods or services that are provided by the producers using the prices set as a standard. These prices that are set as a standard serves two purposes. The role of the information and incentive mechanisms brought by the purpose of the prices of products is to have coordination between the producers and the consumers. This is the focus of microeconomics, to understand whether the prices of the goods and services work under the premise of the purpose of the prices of these products. These two mechanisms also tell us about the possibility of failure of the price mechanism. This means that there are problems that have risen regarding this. There are numerous other factors that can cause failure to the price mechanisms. The price mechanism has also the possibility of being unable to convey information other than scarcity. All in all, there are so many different types of concerns and problems that arise due to potential failure or failure of transactions that happen between consumers and producers that is being studied and dealt with as a subject of interest for microeconomics. It brings the importance of as to why microeconomics holds such a big influence despite not being observed by many non-economists. Even if it is not as widely seen as macroeconomics, it does indeed have an impact in the world of economics as a discipline, which, even more, gives us a reason to learn and understand the concepts that it encompasses.